How often do you reflect on life? Do you ever reflect on life? Do you think about what it was like in the past? Are you thinking about what you would like in the future? Where are you when it comes to reflection? Well, I remember that probably a decade ago, someone said to me, well, since I'm over half a century old, and that sounded really impressive the moment that he said so. And I was thinking today, well, that's me. I'm over half a century old. And quite honestly, I never thought that I would be a day over half a century old. But here I am. I am over half a century old and still going forward. And it's so funny if I look at life now. Well, there's nothing funny about that. But if I look at life now as compared to when I was, say, in my teens or in my 20s or even my 30s, so much has changed. Now, when I was thinking about how to do this live, I was like, okay, what am I going to say? What do I want to get out there? And that's the exact reason why I'm on later, way later than usual, because I've been writing a lot of things and I couldn't settle on a specific topic. So on Friday, I usually look back what has happened earlier in the week, and oh my God, it has been so hectic. So one of the things was on Monday, I had training, and it made it kind of chaotic because it went on till late and it was amazing training. I followed training by Brendon Burchard, by the way, also by Evan Carmichael. And the guy, Brendon, is amazing. He's my role model. And he absolutely wants us to think about what it is that we want to achieve. He not literally says so. He talks more about the marketing and the personal development. But when you think about it, it all has to do with, okay, what is it you want to achieve and how are you going to accomplish that? Now, having had training from him, not only on Monday, but then again also on Thursday, if I'm correct. There were a lot of days, and then Evan Carmichael had training too on Thursday, and I'm pretty sure there was something. Oh yeah, on Wednesday I had training too, and that were the trainings that I got. And then of course there was me. I'm not sure what's happening out there right now. I'm pretty sure it's a neighbors 2 doors down, pumping the gas. They like to, well, they're still young, so basically it's like a gaming center or a place to hang out and chill. What they do till late in the middle of the night. And well, when they take off, it's pedal to the metal and go. And well, normally they can do that at this time since it won't be too busy with people. The only thing is, of course, what if? Now, getting back to everything that has happened this week, like I said, it was a pretty hectic week. And for me, well, on Monday, like I said, I had the training, but I also have the Monday motivational messages. So I sort of had to do that in between. And then on Tuesday, I went to the physical therapist. I had to go to the hospital too. Nothing fancy. And after that, I decided to get some work done before I gave my own training. And at that moment, the phone rang and someone was in a state of panic. And I've been on the phone for over an hour and a half to get that person back to feeling okay again. And, you know, getting the person out of the state of feeling panicky, not knowing what was happening. It was a complete state of overwhelm. And I realized at that moment that it did take its toll on me. But it was also a good thing, because when I talked to my own coach the next day, I actually said, we talked about trauma and all those kind of things. And I said, I don't think I ever dealt much with any trauma that I've had. And sometimes when I talk to people about what I have experienced, some say, wow, that's a lot. When I look at other people, I think, well, it's not that bad. I know people who've had it a lot worse. But the question still remains, and that was one of the things that did come back over and over and over and over again. How do you deal with life when things are different? So for the person here who was dealing with overwhelm, she had experienced weeks of trauma therapy. And I've talked to a lot of people who have been to trauma therapy. And as a therapist, I also had the privilege to explore a number of alternatives. So I'll say it like I sniffled, as in I got a little bit of an impression what EMDR is like, so I know the basics about it. I wouldn't be able to do it myself, but I do know where they're coming from when it comes to EMDR. When it comes to hypnotherapy, that's a whole different ball game. But I do also understand what one wants to accomplish. So when we're talking about exposure therapy, then, that's sort of a combination of one and the other. Now, when I talk about reflection, it's not that I want to talk about trauma. The first thing I was actually thinking about is, yeah, I'm a kid of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s. And then, of course, there was millennium. And, well, now we are already in 2024. And the funny thing is, when I was literally drawing a triangle, and I was like, okay, so here is, I was born in the 70s, but for me, it's like I grew up in the 80s, so I sort of ignore the 70s. And then, during the change in century prior to it, already in the 90s and 2000, a lot of things changed. So working towards the century, that was the time that I was studying, and I started my job and another one, and then I went to the Academy of Arts in between, so many things. And then I worked at some place, and then another, and then somewhere around 2010, I started working for myself as an entrepreneur. And originally, I wanted to say something along the lines like, well, reflection is something that usually is done by people who are entrepreneurs, because they need to think about, where is the business going? Where am I going? What can I do? I mean, compared to regular working people, and please note, I'm not going to say there are only regular working people and entrepreneurs, because that's not the case. And I'll get back to that later. And I was like, but when I was working, of course, I looked at the future, but not in the same way that I'm doing it now. Now it's like, hey, did I build pension? What if I want to retire? Can I actually do so? Not that I want to retire, please note. But, and then I'm reading all these things in paper about people getting older and actually being too old to work, whether it's because of mental stress or because of the physical jobs they did. Think about paramedics, firemen, people working in the streets. Those are jobs which take a toll on your body. But there's also a lot of things that we have to do now. And so getting back to the 80s and now, there's there are so many things which bring me back to the 80s. And why? Because a lot of things that happened in the 80s are being reinvented, like now, and also of course in the last decade. So of course I knew about fashion, and fashion would come back. Well, I've seen it now. My mother told me about it, and it was weird to actually, people were wearing the leggings again. And I mean the leggings as in the ones you actually were up to your knee, the horizontal stripes, um, lots of things that were typical for the 80s, including the big glasses. And oh my God, I am still traumatized from the big glasses. Let's put it this way. I will never again in my life ever buy big glasses again. And it's so funny because I see all those people around me wearing them, and for them it's the norm. And for me, it was the moment that I could wear smaller glasses. I was like, yay! Now, here's the thing. If I put on a pair of glasses without the glasses actually in there, I don't see a thing. So, and the thing is, when I'm using my contact lenses, it's not the same thing because my eyes are big normally. And when I'm wearing glasses, they're very tiny. Well, apart from that, a lot is being redone. We're talking about movies, so remakes of movies. When it comes to music, a lot of artists actually they take pieces of music from then and they remix them nowadays. So a lot of that music comes back. And then of course there are the artists who were there when I was growing up, and I was not allowed to go see them because I was still too young. And then, of course, they had a life and they got a family and kids, and now they're coming back. And here's the thing: when you haven't seen someone for, I don't know, 2 decades, 3 decades, maybe even 4, they look different. I can tell you that much. And being as old as I am nowadays, of course, I think about it a lot. Being coached, I think about it a lot. Coaching other people, I think about it a lot. It's there are generations, and I've shifted, of course, from one generation to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And I was aware of this already when I was in my teens, and then I was in my 20s. And then I realized, okay, I'm not considered a young person anymore. Because, we would have this card specifically for young people, which was up till 27. And if you think about it, in different countries compared to from where I come from, they are already married with tons of kids. And here in the Netherlands, we might start to think about settling down and maybe marriage, maybe. And well, by the time we consider kids, most of us are somewhere in our 30s. So it's kind of funny if you think about it. Anyway, getting back to all those moments in life, I've seen my fair share of things. Now, for some reason, and it happened both in my private life, but also at the jobs I used to work at, for some reason, there was always a gap between me and the previous generation. So there was missing a generation between me and the ones prior. So my parents were older. They both have experienced World War II. So that says some things. My mom experienced it when she was in Indonesia. And my dad experienced over here in the Netherlands. So they were 8 years apart in age. So I can tell you they experienced very differently, because my mom was in her teens and my dad was starting, well, he was adolescent, let's put it that way, and then at some point early 20s. So he had to take over all the responsibility when it came to the family, because my grandfather, his dad, died when he was 41 years old during World War II. And of course, that has made my father the person he was. Now, they couldn't have kids in the beginning. So, long story short, there is an immense gap between me and all the cousins out there. I don't have that many cousins, but they are like 20 years older and above. So it's kind of weird. And that's what I mean with there's a difference in generation. Now, if I look at the places that I used to work, again, I don't know why, but there was me, then there was 20 years missing, and then there was the older generation. So I could see what was happening when it came to reorganizations, with them prepping for retirement. Also seeing the young ones out there, starting to work and have their life, and like I said, partners, everything, whereas the other ones, of course, would have grown up kids. I cannot tell you how, I'm not going to say how weird it was, but it did show me a thing or two. So now I am in my 50s and I don't have any kids, but I do have my clients I'm helping out, and a lot of them are actually in their 20s and nowadays also in their 30s. And then there are I've got my actual nephews and nieces who are around in their 20s something. And then there are the kids of friends of mine, and some are in the same age range as my nieces and nephews. And then there are those who are a lot younger. And I have to say, it's so nice to actually see how they are dealing with things, how smart they are. They are being raised in a time where we have the IT. To give an example, I use it more often, but it's so telling. When I think about a phone, that for me is the phone. And of course, looking back at series from the 80s, what do I see? We actually see the phone. You see the satellite phone and how it all came into existence, and it brings me right back to when I was growing up. Well, today's youth, phone, here is phone. So when we ring, well, I actually don't have the phone next to my ear. Why not? Because my ear loves to dial. So I usually talk either on the microphone of the phone, or I have my headset on. But this, no, doesn't really work for me. But yes, to end the call, in my case, click. When I turn off the earphones. And it's like there is a huge gap. And of course, there's a huge gap because that gap was with the introduction of IT. And I was actually at the beginning stages of it. I started working in IT real young. Actually, my first holiday job was already in IT. And the funny thing is that a friend of mine and me, we said, we're not going to go into IT because our brothers who were close friends were always walking around with these binders completely filled with all these printouts of programming language, and I don't know what was in there. And sure enough, I ended up in the IT as well. You would have thought I wouldn't, I can tell you that much. But it has really helped me a lot. And then at some point, I did more with personal development. Started when I became a trainer. It continued on when I had my burnouts. And then at some point, I decided to become a therapist and later a coach and then a bunch of other things, medical fitness trainer. And a lot of those things were inspired, well, I would almost say by chance. I mean, I'm probably one of the few who never had biology as a form for my diploma. Let's put it that way. I mean, of course, I've had some, but at some point I dropped it. And he was the one who knows more about biology, at least the human body, than most other people. Well, that's me, because I had to study it a lot, both as physical therapist, not a physical therapist, as a fitness trainer, and of course as a medical fitness trainer. But also when I became a therapist, I had to know it too. And then being a sports masseuse, hey, there we went again. Now, there was a reason why I became a medical fitness instructor, because it all started out with that part, which was I didn't have a clue how my body worked. And here's the thing, that nowadays, and that's the thing that I absolutely didn't expect, nowadays I get to help out other people, specifically also the young ones out there, and also some which are my age, who actually experience the same thing. And I'll get back to the reflection part, by the way. But this is what's so interesting. When I was growing up, besides that, there was no such thing as let's look it up on the computer. I mean, we still had to go through books. So there was not that much known about the things I had to deal with. So I'm hypermobile. And well, if you look at it more thoroughly, I've got something which is called EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So Ehlers was a doctor, Danlos was a doctor. And they came up with the same things with regards to hypermobility. So it's more than just hypermobility. It has to do with the ligaments and everything. And nowadays, here I am helping out the ones who are dealing with those physical issues and who are not heard, seen, and understood. And that's the thing. When I started working, well, let's start with when I was growing up. What are you going to do? Well, a graphic designer. My mom always said, you're going to go to the Academy of Arts and you'll become a graphic designer. Okay, well, I'm going to become a graphic designer. Why? Because I was always drawing and I was writing stories and everything. So yeah, that made sense. Like I said, when I started working in the IT, that was also a fluke. I mean, when I started working in IT during my holiday jobs, why was it? Because I had a specific form of mathematics. And they were like, oh, well, you seem suitable. Okay. I changed my life, those guys. I mean, it was the first time I was taken seriously. And the guy, Jan Toen, I'll never forget that guy. I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know if he's still around. I don't know if he's on social media. But I'm just going to throw it out there. Jan Toen, you're a champ. He made me see that I was worth something. I was worth being listened to. Also. So now here I am, and I am guiding those people who are not heard, seen, and understood. Like I said, when growing up, I was like, okay, I'm going to be graphic designer. Then at some point I was in the IT. When I was 28, I was a manager of some sort. And it was like, well, I've done it all. I was driving a big car. And there was a lot of laughter about it. Remember, like I said, there was a gap missing between me and the older generation. So they saw me, and there I was, in my 20s in a big car, and they were little girl, big car. And you know, that was me back then. But of course, a couple of decades have passed. And the things I ran into back then and which were not acknowledged are still out there now. So I already mentioned I've had a number of burnouts. I also had repetitive strain injury, where you cannot do anything with those hands anymore. And there were also other things. And what it came down to is I couldn't set boundaries. I'd never been told to set boundaries, let alone that I knew how to act on them. I mean, I was bullied when I was young. So, that already changes things. And when I grew up, and remember that I grew up with parents who had been through World War II. So it was a little bit on the edge. So the ones younger than me, you could tell that they had experienced a different life and a different outlook, and looked at what they were supposed to earn very differently compared to how I was brought up. And back in the days, especially after the World War II, of course, everything was about rebuilding stuff. Like I said, there were no things like computers. Well, they started to come, and of course, they were there in the background, the mainframes and all that stuff. But there was not much known about, hey, what is it that you want to do? And I mean, we were talking about anthropology, and we were talking about physiotherapy. And then, of course, there were the ones who would go into chemistry and all that stuff. And yes, IT. So it was a whole different time back then. But when it came to boundaries, and this is, I'm going to tell you a little story here because it's kind of funny. So nowadays on Instagram, there is this lady, and apparently she has a whole room dedicated to the 80s. She makes all these little videos, and then there's so much humor into it. But what she actually says is, well, look at how dangerous this time was, because nowadays everything has to be done with extreme caution. And of course, we would get the key to the door because parents would be working. We would go to playgrounds, but there were no safety features in those playgrounds. A lot of things were so different. And I remember that when I started working, smoking was the norm. And actually, the department where I started working, I'm not talking about the holiday job, but the job prior to going to the Academy of Arts, was slowly being dissolved. And then another department actually came into the room where I was working. And they were smoking. Oh my God, that was the norm back then. I remember later on when I was working at different companies, I would go into one of those smoking rooms, and it was like, oh my God, I opened the door. All the walls were yellow and the ceilings were yellow. So by the time that the century changed, of course, that was the time that they said, well, let's stop smoking. And it was slowly being banned from the working place. People had to go smoke outside. Ooh, I'm so happy about that. But again, back to boundaries. I didn't know much about boundaries. I knew I was not happy with the people smoking in my room, but did I say much about it? Well, no. I wasn't happy when I turned 19 and they smashed the cake in my face. But what did I know? Little to nothing. And when I started working, And I have to say this thing. I was so lucky to have started out at a company where they saw the people and they nurtured their employees and they talked about what do you see in your future, what do you want, what kind of training do you want, and they literally guided us on the job. And up till this day, I wish I would still have people like that around me. And I guess that's why I love listening to Brendan Burchard so much and taking all the notes, because for me, he's that role model. He knows and has done certain things. And he can tell me, like, okay, this is what you need to focus on. So, no boundaries. I didn't know about boundaries. How should I have known about boundaries? So now let's move forward. I have been so lucky that I became a trainer in IT, and later, of course, the physical trainer and the fitness trainer. Yeah, I'm a little bit tired, so if I sometimes say things a little bit weird, then you know why it is. It's late at night over here, but I wanted to come up with something that made sense. So because of that, I've done a lot of personal development. I've had a lot of coaching, and people told me about boundaries. And whereas at that first company, boundaries, nah, it was like, well, you're young, you were a former student, and we want you to actually drive all the way over to, I don't know. So it was normal for us to drive at least 1 hour, sometimes 2 hours. If we were in luck and we had to drive several hours just going, in one direction, we were allowed to stay either at a hotel or at a cottage or something. They would arrange things for us. And like I said, it was a great company to work at. Every weekend we would get together on Fridays, for drinks and everything. Not that I consume any alcohol, but it was nice. And you got to see your colleagues, because we would always be at different companies. We would be sent to work at a different company where they needed employers at that moment. So it was nice to be back at base. But boundaries, yes. And thinking about the future and thinking about what it is that I needed, that came with the jobs. It came with the burnouts. It came with the physical ailments, as they call it. And nowadays, here I am. And when I look back on everything that has happened, but also with the books I'm reading right now, it all starts to make sense. So, one of the things I've been reading about is neurodiversity. And so, they talk in this book about the difference between men and women. And they talk about how women were always excluded from any medical studies. So, when research had to be done, the male was more stable, as in we as women, besides being more sensitive and, things, the man was the hunter and we were the one taking care of the family. But of course, besides that, we also have our hormonal periods, which also changes us. So we were a little annoying as test subjects. They had to have a fixed, steady group which they could count on, and women were not seen as such. And reading that part, I was like, yeah, I know a long time about being hypersensitive. I know about overwhelm and all those things. And I know that I have a problem when I'm working at places where I'm surrounded by people who, they're calling, doing all the other stuff, and where we are supposed to do all those things. Now, when I was thinking about what do I want to talk about? Remember that I talked about the triangle, so 80s up till millennium, and then now. The one thing that struck me was what IT has done for us. So there are so many good things when it comes to IT. I mean, just think about computer programs for drawings and animation. But nowadays, artificial intelligence, I had no clue that it was going to work out for me. At first, I was like, artificial intelligence. But now I know, for instance, that right now this live is being recorded, and later on, I can actually click something and it generates those little clips for me, including a title. And I'm like, ooh, that's so cool. And saves me a lot of work. Of course, when I am working on my own shorts, it takes me all the time in the world, because then I get a little something from here and a little something from there, and I add a little, and all considered, that takes me a couple of hours for 1 minute of video. But it's so cool. And well, I'll honestly say it's about progress, and so much more is possible. And I feel really blessed, quite honestly, to be able as a coach to work with all those things. So like I said, I've been to the Academy of Arts. I was working behind this little Apple computer. It was really tiny, for computer graphics. And I already got taught how to work with cameras. That was when you actually would go into the dark room with the red light, and you would develop your own film, and then actually print as in develop your own pictures. Nothing printed about it. It was literally developed. And now I get to enjoy all the phones with their great cameras and their apps. And then, of course, we have the iPads, and we have all the other apps, and we have the notebooks and whatever. And still the digital cameras, which used to be like the how do we call it? The mirrored cameras. No, that's not entirely the mirrored reflex cameras. Well, that's probably when I translated literally from Dutch to English. Well, the one I'm using is actually a system camera. That's how they call it, with the big lenses. And it's so cool to be able to do my job the way I can do it, and then have everything combined. I mean, I feel really blessed and feel really lucky. But now getting back to the whole reflection thing, because that's what I started out with. And so when I started writing, at first it was like, well, it's something for entrepreneurs. And then when I was writing it down, I was like, well, that's not fair, of course. And then I was like, yeah, so where would I divide people into when it comes to groups? So the working people, so there are the entrepreneurs, and then there are the ones who are employees, and then of course there are the parents, the stay-at-home parents who take care of the kids. Yeah, I consider that hard work. And of course, not everyone is in a position to stay at home, and that they actually have a spouse or partner who is working for them. And there's still partners nowadays, both of them work, but you still see that it's the women who cut back on hours, and the men are still working full time. And of course, there are a lot of single parents too nowadays. So also there, a lot has changed. But getting back to perspective, to reflection, to dreams, the question is, how much of it do we actually, how many things are we doing because we want to do them, because they are a dream of us, because they are related to a passion of us? So how many things are being done just because that's the way things went down. I mean, for me, like I said, I went to the Academy of Arts because my mom said you're going to be a graphic designer because you're always drawing. Again, she was spot on. I was always drawing. I ended up in the IT, absolutely unexpected. And then I started to go into not just personal development, but a lot of things had to do with the body actually. That hence the fitness instructor, the medical fitness instructor, the sports masseuse, and the therapist, which all had to do with I didn't understand this body that I was in, and I was like, how does it work? And that brought me actually to what I'm doing nowadays. So, from a therapist, I had to stop being a therapist because there was no more funding from it by the healthcare insurance companies. And then I changed a few things, and now I do coaching both locally, but mostly also online. And what I want is I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave a legacy where people learn how to communicate with one another, be heard, seen, understood, respected, valued. But how long have I known this, that I want to leave that legacy? That's what I've been wondering about. And I don't think it's that long, actually. It probably started when I became an entrepreneur and I started to do all these online trainings out there. And because of my own experiences and from being a therapist, later on also coaching people and doing other stuff, I came in a position where I could guide people towards a different outcome than what I had experienced back in the days. Oh my God, back in the days. Yeah, that makes me sound really old. And that's so rewarding. I cannot tell you how rewarding that is to actually be able to support people and guide them so they don't fall into the same trap or in that same system that I had to go through. Well, actually, there wasn't much of a system since people didn't know what was going on with me. But other than that, I felt so left out so many times. And now being able to be there for others and actually assist them and support them, that's amazing. So every day that I work, I know what I want to work on. I know what I'm doing it for. And then I get back to the trainings from Brendan. So he was talking about the importance of what the audience wants. So he said, a lot of people, they talk about stories. We need to know our story. But, if you shared your story, at some point, people know your story. So they want something else. And what do they want? They want something where they are understood. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And that brings me back to what I'm doing nowadays, actually guiding those out there who need someone to speak up for them. So sometimes I literally speak up for the people. That's what I do locally. But when it comes to online training, of course, it's about teaching people how to speak up themselves. It's about teaching them that they are worth being heard, seen, and understood. It's about teaching them that they can have dreams and they can act on it. So now to the part of the whole reflection. One of the things that I do regularly is I work with meditations. And when it comes to meditations, you use elements from experiences people have had, which help them to go deeper into the meditation. Sounds, smells, touch, things like that. But we also want people, especially when we're talking about trauma therapy, to take a step back and look at, hey, what has happened? But of course, we don't need to use that solely for trauma therapy. We can use it for looking at our lives and what has happened up till now and what we would like to happen as well. So one of the things I also do is I take people to the future. And then we talk about the role model. We talk about the future version of yourself who knows what needs to be done, who is equipped and skilled. And of course, that's almost like a shock to the system because there's one out there who actually already has lived through it and knows it. And all the obstacles that we have, like now in the present, it's gone because they already lived through it and they thought about it and they came up with their own answers. And if you think about it and you think about role models, how cool is it that you can actually be your own role model? Because we, deep down, we know ourselves pretty well. Now, why do I talk about role models and why do I talk about looking at the future? Because when it comes to our dreams, a lot of people are so scared to act on it. And one of the things that I actually talked about on Monday was, do you dare to, well, it came down to take imperfect action. So do you dare to fail at times? And what I basically meant was, if you have a dream, how horrible is it that things do not go right straight away? How horrible is it that we need time to evolve, to nurture our skills, to become the person that we want to be? And maybe we don't even know who we want to be, but that's sort of, it follows the line of whatever is out there and whatever the possibilities are. So it's sort of like a flow, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. But what if you don't dare to take action at all? What if you're stuck in the past because of traumas or fear or negativity? There are a lot of people who have not been trained to reflect on the way that they are thinking. They are not capable of reflecting it internally. So they might be able to reflect themselves, thinking about what should I have done differently, but they are not capable of looking at how they could have, why other people have done things the way they have done, or how they could do things differently themselves. It's more like they look at, okay, this is me, this is what I would do, so why aren't others doing the same thing that I'm doing? So reflecting, of course, has to do with, why did I make that choice? And how could I do things differently next time around? And also looking at what others are doing and learning from that aspect. And then I do get back to being entrepreneurs. I do believe that we have to think about where do we want to go. I mean, just look at COVID and what that did. A lot of people who were entrepreneurs, they had to reinvent themselves. So getting back to the whole reflection thing, I had no clue that one day I would be talking about speaking up and speaking out. In retrospect, I say everything that I've done has led up to this. And as a matter of fact, I was talking to my coach about it, and I said, the one thing that I really want to do, and I started talking about it over a decade ago, is I would love it if I could make change happen in businesses. I'm not necessarily thinking about big organizations. I'm thinking about smaller organizations where managers or business owners are basically not equipped with the tools to guide other people. And those are the things that I've seen a lot when I was still working. And because of my burnout and because of not having been understood and because of what I now know is about being neurodivergent, seeing things differently compared to a whole bunch of people, also seeing things that were going to happen in the future, which, just made sense based on logic. And then others would say, well, we're not there yet. So still feeling misunderstood, not being seen, also being harassed at work, whether it was on purpose or not. It has really formed me in who I am, but it has made me more determined than ever to not have the same thing happen to others. And when I was thinking about today and what I wanted to get across was like, hey, is this about reflection? Is this about me thinking back and looking back on my life? And I was like, well, it's about reflection, because this is about who are you and what do you want to do? And I know a lot of people don't dare to take action as in towards the dream they have. Because, well, money, for instance, so there is something called security and physical aspects. Just think about physical aspects. I'm not the only one who deals with a lack of energy and who cannot do it all because of physical circumstances. Now, I do realize that most people never deal with people who are young and already have physical disabilities. For some reasons, I do. I don't know. I already hang out with people who were in wheelchairs when I was at high school. And for some reason, that continued on. And then I started working with people who had autism and other kind of things. Looking back on it, it's logical that I am where I am now. But again, the choice to leave a legacy, if you asked me 20 years ago, I would have looked at you, really? Are you okay? And that's what I mean. It's by being asked all these questions over and over and over again about who are you? What do you want to coach about? What is your story? What are you good at? Where did you find solutions where others didn't find them? But again, also about, but what is it? Who do you want to be? Who is your future version? And when talking to my coach this week, I said, I don't only want to be working with the people about what's your dream, what's that one thing you want to accomplish. I want to go beyond that, because I want people to learn to speak up, speak out, share their story, being heard, seen, understood, valued, respected. And then I got back to when I was still working, I said, so many people are not understood and they are fearful of reorganizations, and where things were like you work till the end of days and then you go into retirement, but you're still at the same company. That has totally changed, and now you need to evolve yourself and think about the future over and over and over again, and not everyone is capable of doing so. And the one thing that I've realized is that sometimes people at a young age are already limited in thinking about which direction they want to go because, well, things which have happened to them physically or they are experiencing physically, or because they are hypersensitive, so there's a lot of overwhelm, or because they think just a little bit differently, and then we get to the neurodivergence. And I understand those people because I've always been one of those who felt like I would start somewhere and I would be so enthusiastic, and then new management would come in, and then all of a sudden everything changed, and I was like, what am I doing here? It was the weirdest thing to experience that over and over and over again. But I feel blessed, I feel lucky that I have found my purpose in life. And what I know more than ever is I don't know how old I'm going to be. And because of that, one of the things I really want to do is work on that legacy. So when I'm no longer around, people can still take advantage of what I got out there. And whether it is because I'm influencing people now and becoming their role model now, which in turn has its ripple effect, or maybe because I already wrote a book and people start reading it, and other courses out there, I don't know. All I know is I want to leave a legacy because I deem it's important that people are able to actually speak up for what it is they want and for what they need. And of course, my life, especially in the last decade, has been about not being heard and needing to be heard. So, of course, the same thing applied when I was still at elementary school and at kindergarten, even, and also at high school and even at the Academy of Arts. But this was actually about something physical going on and the doctors not wanting to listen to me. And with a friend, we actually, we started figuring out, how do we get clarity? How do we get across to the medical staff what it is we want to say? And nowadays, I can teach other people. And I honestly say that feels good. Now, getting back to the whole reflection thing, a lot of people don't dare to follow their dream because of fear. The fear for the unknown, overwhelm, I cannot do it, lack of courage, who am I to? Not having the skills, not having the money to actually nurture those skills, or simply because they have a very different lifestyle. I mean, I'm the one out there who doesn't have to worry about anything. I mean, my parents are no longer there, so I don't have to take care of them. I don't have any kids, so basically I can go anywhere where I want. Easy, right? Comes with price, I do say so, and it comes also with a lot of freedom and a lot of fun. So that's the good thing. But what if you are someone who has a family, who has children, who has grandchildren, and feels like, hey, that's my life. And they do have a dream, but they're so used at taken care of because that's what we've been doing for generations on end. And some out there, they are really good at their job. That's why I said stay at home parents. I applaud them, and usually you can tell who their kids are. They're very different. And that's again, it's positive. There's also a negative, or with every negative there's positive. There's always the one thing and the other. So when you are home raised or homeschooled, or however you want to say it, adapting to society is always a little bit more difficult compared to when you already went to kindergarten, and before that pre-kindergarten, and hang out with other toddlers and everything. So it shapes you, who you are. Now, the one thing that stuck with me is that whereas so many things have changed, there are also so many things which are still the same. And that's what I thought a lot about this week. The children who are thinking differently compared to others, who have their own way to come to conclusions, whether it's with doing mathematics or other things. Children who need more guidance, whether it's because they are a little slower or they are quite the opposite, a little faster, or because they need a better explanation on what it is you actually want from them. And there's hardly any place or time for those people out there. That's sad. That's really sad. Now, if we not only look at the young ones out there, but we also look at people, say, my age, there are a lot of people out there who want something different, but do not know how to go about it. Who is reaching out to them? Who is helping them out to figure out what it is they want and then also be able to take action? Well, if they're lucky, they have a coach like I do. And if they're lucky, they have friends and people they can talk to, so they have a good support system. And if they're a little less lucky, then they do not have that support system and they're stuck in their life. And future version of myself, really? You know. But if you can actually look at that concept and then think about, okay, so what would the future version of me do? Those answers, they could be surprising. And that's one of the things that I learned too this week. That one single question can make you reflect and think about things so deeply. And that's not always fun, I'll honestly say. But once you get there and you get to the place where you want to be, then oh my God, that is so energizing. So when I said to my coach, this is not only about people wanting to achieve their dream and do that one thing and overcoming fear and learning to speak up, but this is also about those companies out there where people need to learn to speak up and be heard, seen, and understood. And like I said, it already happens at schools, but it also happens in organizations where people are working, and we are talking about grown-ups, people somewhere from 20s till in their 60s. Isn't it time for them to be heard, seen, and understood, be valued, be respected? I think it is. And if I can be one of those people, you can make a change for all those people out there, both the managers and the owners, because finally they feel like they're being heard and understood. And also on the other end, the employees who are like, hey, finally the manager gets an idea of what it is I want and they're indulging me in exploring it. That would make life so much better. Well, the whole reflection thing, looking back on the day, on the week, on the month. So on Fridays, I look back on the week and I have this theme every month. And right now it's influence. So that already started in March. I actually did the influence challenge at the end of March. If you want to, you can sign up for that one. You can take a look at it or participate in it for a week for free. No charges, anything. And if you want it, you can buy it afterwards. But I'm still talking about influence this month, the month of April. And that is, well, first of all, the next topic would be mastery psychology. But I'm not done with the topic of influence. And I've spoke about it a lot. Influence is about you influencing yourself, you influencing others, you being influenced by others. And of course, also being influenced by the circumstances. And yeah, with influence comes reflection. So where are you? Where are you at? Which part of this story is something that you say, well, that resonated with me, and I would like to know more about it. Can you tell me? Because if you do, then I can get into it. And maybe you even want to be coached by me. That's possible. Or you want to be part of the group coaching training on Tuesdays. But more importantly, I need to know what resonated with you and what would you like to know more about. Because I can study everything when it comes to mindsets and other stuff. But it's not about me. It's about me wanting to leave a legacy related to speaking up, speaking out, sharing your story. And for me, it's important to figure out, hey, what is it that you are missing? What is it that you actually picked up on and what you're using nowadays? And that way, we build a support system for one another. And that's the one thing in this time that we are missing, a good support system. So let's get back to that support system. I mean, I love IT, but just doing this all the time, let's change that. Let's be there. Let's see the other person again. And, share our stories, support one another, and, just smile at someone. Want to see more Friday Night Lives? Then go there. Yes, go there, click on there, and you'll see more episodes.